people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that unbeaten up-and-comer from the United Kingdom, Ebonie Jones, has herself a rescheduled fight date. She's going to be returning to action April 12th at the Magna Center.
Wasn't she supposed to have fought already?
She was. A little over 2 months ago, the story was the British Boxing Board of Control had approved a request for Ebonie Jones and Stevie Levy to face off for the inaugural British Super Bantamweight title. For whatever reason, Ebonie Jones ended up pulling out, but Stevie Levy was able to save the date. She fought on February 9th against Dorita Norek for a version of the EBU title.
You think that Ebonie Jones got cold feet?
Do I think that Ebonie Jones was ducking Stevie Levy? No, I don't. Ebonie Jones has more of an amateur background and a higher ceiling than Stevie Levy. And had they fought, I had Ebonie Jones winning the fight. I had Ebonie Jones winning a decision.
She pulled out of that thing, and now she's set to return to action in April on the 12th in what will be her first fight this year.
An interesting component in relation to this fight, as it relates to what was supposed to be the Stevie Levy fight, is where the Stevie Levy fight was supposed to be at Super Bantamweight 122. This fight she's having in April is billed as a featherweight contest, a featherweight bout at 126. So maybe the reason that Ebonie pulled out of the fight with Stevie is because she couldn't make Super Bantamweight.
She couldn't make 122.
Ebonie Jones started out under the Boxer banner, you know. After Matchroom and Sky Sports parted ways and Boxer took over, she was among those fresh faces like Georgia O'Connor, Shannon Ryan.
Not every fighter that started out with Boxer is still there now. Georgia O'Connor left.
Shannon Ryan went to Matchroom. She's no longer with Boxer, and neither is Ebonie Jones. This upcoming fight that she's about to have is not a Boxer show. It's not a Boxer promotion. It's a Steffi Bull promotion. Steffi Bull, you may be familiar with that name. That's the same Steffi Bull that handles the career of multi-weight champion Terry Harper. People tend to forget that before Terry signed to Matchroom, it was Steffi that was promoting her.
Not just training her.
Took a gamble on Terry Harper, and it paid off. And now it appears that unbeaten up-and-comer Ebonie Jones is going to be boxing on one of his shows against an opponent that has yet to be announced. I'm not sure if they're going to try to reschedule the Stevie Levy fight at featherweight instead of super bantamweight.
Or if she's fighting somebody else.
25 years old, Ebonie Jones has many good years to give to the sport of boxing, but it does feel like her career needs more traction, needs to get on solid ground, and she needs to get a move on. Seems to be campaigning anywhere in between 122 and 126. At 122, there are count them four, reigning champions. IBF champion Ellie Scottney,
Catford.
WBC champion of Mexico, Yemi Mercado, WBO champion of La France, Sigaline Lafarve, and WBA champion Erica Cruz.
4 champions.
4 pots to a title if Ebonie Jones can get down there. If she can't, and she stays at featherweight, there are 2 champions at featherweight.
Sort of.
There is Amandia Serrano, that division's unified Ring Magazine and lineal champion, in possession of 3 of the 4 major titles.
There is the winner of Sky Nicholson versus Sarah Mahfoud to consider for what will be the vacant WBC title.
She's with Matchroom. What you must consider is that this could be Amanda Serrano's final year in the sport of boxing. After the Nina Menke fight, I believe she's scheduled to go back into MMA via the PFL. If and when she does, she may vacate the 3 alphabet titles she's currently holding, freeing them up for somebody like an Ebonie Jones to come in
and grab one.
But as stated, her career's got to get some traction. She only fought once last year, just once, so hopefully she'll have a more productive year this year because she still needs professional experience, more of it to amass.
Fighting those eliminators, get in line to fight for a title.
It's a process, and for Ebonie Jones, it is a necessary evil because she doesn't have that many pro fights.
She needs the rounds.
Set to return to action later on this year in April. Keep your eyes peeled for the ring return of Ebonie Jones, and we'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. In men's super middleweight news, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Al Haymon's PBC are reportedly ready to pay Canelo Alvarez his guaranteed purse, said to be around $35 million, for a fight versus Jaime Munguia on May 4th, but not if he insists on Charlo. It's claimed the PBC believe the fight with Munguia would sell better.
What the hell's going on here?
This story comes to us by way of ESPN Mexico and their sources.
Using sophisticated and secret technologies, we were able to decipher the foreign language.
For the last 2 weeks or so, there's been widespread speculation as to whether or not Al Haymon would be able to get Canelo Alvarez his guarantee of $35 million in that neighborhood.
Some speculated that he might not be able to, and if he doesn't, Canelo's going to jump ship.
So what this story essentially indicates is that it's Canelo Alvarez insisting on fighting Charlo, and his guarantee is only under the condition that he fights Jaime, not Jamal, because the people at the PBC feel that is a more commercially viable fight, and they would be right.
It would sell better. Nobody gives a fuck about the Charlos.
That doesn't mean that any of this is true, but that's what the story is, so we will proceed on that assumption, that Canelo's insisting on Jamal where the PBC wants him to fight Jaime. You have to remember what it was exactly that Rick Glacier said. Rick Glacier said that Canelo Alvarez's money was not yet in escrow. It wasn't ready for him.
It seems he was right.
So many people gave him a hard time about that, but it would appear that time has proven him right. If Canelo Alvarez has not yet decided who he's going to fight, then the money for the fight can't be in escrow because they'll only make it available to him if he fights Jaime, not Jamal. Which could cause Canelo to part ways with the PBC if he sticks to his guns, and he's known for doing that.
Can they afford to lose him?
I think the better question is, can they afford to stake $35 million on a Canelo versus Charlo fight?
It's actually more than $35 million. $35 million is just what's going to Canelo.
You have to factor in whatever's going to Charlo, whatever's going to the undercard fighters, and other operational costs. Can they afford to put on a fight like that? Because that fight really isn't as commercially viable as the Munguia fight. With the Munguia fight, you have a better chance of not only getting your money back, but making some money.
So while you're wondering whether or not they can afford to lose Canelo Alvarez, can they afford to put on that fight? Can they afford to put on Canelo versus Charlo? And I don't think they can.
Not based on how his brother just did last year with Canelo. Nobody wants to see Canelo in there with another one of the Charlo brothers. The PBC are in a tough spot. They really are. Because they're gambling losing Canelo Alvarez and having him walk, having him leave, having him go somewhere else, on the premise that they're attaching conditions to his guarantee.
Is he gonna go for that?
You know, that's a part of why he left Golden Boy Promotions. Golden Boy Promotions violated their existing agreement with Canelo Alvarez by empowering DAZN to have a say in who he fights and what he makes.
That's what caused the split, among other things.
That they already had an agreement with Canelo that he decides who he fights. But when they walked into that deal with DAZN, they gave them a say-so, which violated their existing agreement with Canelo. This situation with the PBC is similar to that one in the sense that they're making his guarantee contingent upon their approval of who he's fighting.
And historically, Canelo Alvarez, he does what he wants to do. He marches to the beat of his own drum.
So if what you're telling him is you can't get him $35 million for an opponent of his choosing, he might so decide to walk. And where would that leave the PBC? He's your ace in the hole at a time when many of the fighters that used to fight under the PBC banner, on PBC undercards, on PBC shows, at a time when a lot of those guys seem to be floating away, your ace in the hole was that you at least have the face of boxing in this country, the top earner. If he leaves, what are you left with?
Spence versus Crawford rematch doesn't look to be happening. Not that that fight is commercially viable anyway.
It isn't. Gervonta Davis, what are you going to do with him?
Frank Martin? Rayo?
Canelo Alvarez exiting this deal under these circumstances would be a critical blow to the schedule. What fights they hope to make, because at least with him, you know, you've got two big shows that you can do. Two big fights, but if he leaves.
What's the state of the PBC gonna be?
So just looking at this from the PBC's perspective, on the premise that the story is true,
They're in a tough spot.
you're gambling losing this guy. Can you afford to lose him?
Can they afford to do Canelo versus Charlo?
In order to appease him, in order to keep him on board, to perhaps do a bigger fight later on in the year.
I don't think they have the resources to do that.
To take a hit now in order to do a bigger show later.
That's their perspective.
From our perspective, if you're reading this story and the story is true and the intel is good, then that would have to mean Canelo's the one insisting he fight Charlo. No one wants to see him fight Charlo. Out of those two opponent options, if you ask around, most people will tell you they'd rather see him fight Jaime than fight Jamal, and Jaime is a bigger commercial fight.
Easier to sell.
Much easier to sell, much more commercially viable than a Charlo fight. But Canelo Alvarez seems to be sticking to his guns that he doesn't want to fight one of his own countrymen. If the intel is good!
Enough of that shit, alright?
I'm sorry, but I can't get behind that fight. I can't support it. I'm a big fan of Canelo Alvarez, but this is one time I have to disagree.
I don't want to see him fight Charlo.
If he is the one who's insisting on that fight, if he's the one pushing for it, then he has to be held accountable.
That's a cherry pick.
John Ryder was a mandatory. Jermel Charlo, I could see. He was undisputed at junior middle.
Undisputed versus undisputed.
He was running his mouth, he was bumping his gums, he was asking for it, and he got it. He got dominated. So why would we want to see you fight his twin brother?
Why?
After that?
Why?
It's inexcusable. It can't be defended. A Jaime Munguia fight I can tolerate. That I can get behind, but not this.
Wait a minute, what about all the people who are criticizing him for not fighting slick black fighters?
Listen, you can't get hung up on that stuff because those guys are just gonna move the goalpost when you give them what they asked for. He already did that when he fought Austin Trout, who was unbeaten at the time. He already did that when he fought Lara. He already did that when he fought Jacobs. He already did that in his last fight with Jermel Charlo.
What those guys have been saying is no justification for another Charlo fight. I'm sorry.
It can't be defended. And if the story rings true, that it's Canelo that's asking for this, he wants to fight the other Charlo brother, the drunk one, the one who was just begging for change outside of Aiden Ross's apartment.
Enough is enough.
There are limits. Even for the face of boxing, even for the cash cow, there are limits. This might be what splits them up. So let's say it does. Let's say they're at an impasse. They don't want to do the Charlo fight. They don't give Canelo the guarantee. He leaves.
They're fucked.
Any scenario where Canelo Alvarez doesn't fight Jaime for the PBC,
They're fucked.
they're fucked. This is all bad for them. The only way they come out on top is if Canelo Alvarez fights Jaime on their platform. The structure of that deal seems to be between Zenfer Promotions and PBC directly. There doesn't seem to be much, if any, involvement from Golden Boy, Jaime's co-promoter.
This is Zanfer and the PBC doing this.
But I don't understand. Didn't Oscar De La Hoya, well over a year ago, say that he would not allow Jaime to cross over to Showtime unless DAZN was involved?
For Canelo?
For Charlo, for Jermel Charlo. Remember when Showtime was offering to do that fight and pay for it, and Oscar said that DAZN had to be involved, and if they're not involved, then he's not sending him over.
That was bullshit.
I told you then, that was bullshit. Jaime Munguia is not a fighter who was a big part of DAZN's bottom line. I don't think he's a big part of their bottom line now.
I don't know about you guys, but I always thought that was bullshit. I always thought that was just Oscar using that as an excuse to not send him over.
But in this situation, they would be sending him to a PBC platform, a different one, but still, they'd be sending him to the PBC for Canelo.
Maybe they're more willing this time because it's Canelo, because it's for Canelo. It's the biggest fight that Jaime can have. Maybe it's that way.
Let's not lose track here. Any scenario where Canelo doesn't fight Jaime is bad for the PBC, it is. That's saying that if Canelo fights Jamal on their platform, they buckle, they give him the guarantee, and he fights Jamal,
Bad.
That's bad for them.
Bad.
But it's also bad if he doesn't fight Jamal and he leaves.
That's bad too.
It's the strength of the stable, the strength of the schedule, without Canelo Alvarez on it. What the fuck are you gonna do? That was your ace in the hole. Nobody's really interested in most of those other guys you've got. You've put David Benavidez on pay-per-view not once but twice, and practically no one bought those fights.
And Javante, forget about Javante, because he won't do with Rayo, he won't do with Frank Martin what he did last year with Ryan Garcia. you can fucking forget it.
Errol Spence?
Still scraping up pieces of that guy with a spatula.
It's a state of that guy. Is he gonna come back? If he comes back, who does he fight? Who does he fight? What fight can you make for him that makes money? After the shellacking that Terrence Crawford put on him, what fight can you put Errol in that he can actually win and that will yield a profit?
Telling you, it's all bad.
Benavidez. What the fuck are you gonna do with Benavidez? The whole thing with Benavidez is a potential Canelo fight. If Canelo leaves the PBC,
There goes the neighborhood.
so believe me when I tell you that the PBC are in a rough spot, and any scenario that isn't Canelo versus Munguia on their platform, it's all bad for them. It's all bad.
What about Canelo?
Well, I understand that he's the top earning boxer in the sport of boxing, the biggest draw to face and all that good stuff, but if he walks away, what's he walking into? Where does he go?
Back to Matchroom?
To do what? To fight who?
Bivol rematch?
Bivol busy. Bivol's supposed to be fighting Artur Beterbiev over the summer months in the undisputed light heavyweight contest. He's spoken for.
Berlanga?
Nobody wants to see Canelo Alvarez fight Edgar Berlanga. If he even wins this weekend and he makes it past this McCrory guy, nobody wants to see Edgar fight Canelo. That's a mismatch. For me and my money, that's just as bad as a Charlo fight. It's a mismatch.
So it's not all sunshine and rainbows for Canelo if he walks, if he sticks to his guns and he leaves. If he leaves the PBC, where's he going?
Is he going to Matchroom?
To fight who?
Is he going to Top Rank?
To fight who?
I'm not even going to entertain him going back to Golden Boy Promotions because even if he did, who would he fight there? The biggest fight that you could make on the Golden Boy Promotions side of things is the Jaime Munguia fight. That's the fight that, per this report, he doesn't want.
PBC, Golden Boy, same shit.
And this has got to stop. I got a lot of respect for Canelo Alvarez. I think he's got the best resume of any active boxer right now, if not one of the best resumes of any active boxer. But if it's Charlo or bust, if it's Charlo or nobody,
You want to die on that hill?
for that guy, there's no other way to interpret that than Canelo Alvarez wanting to stay on easy street, wanting far too much money for a fight that is not commercially viable.
Even for him.
The fuck am I supposed to say? I don't want to see him fight another one of the Charlo brothers. Would be widely favored to beat Jaime Munguia in a far more entertaining fight that would draw a larger crowd, more revenue at the gate, more revenue at the box office. Enough with the I don't want to fight my countrymen stuff.
This is a postmodern thing. You never used to hear this bullshit way back when.
Do you imagine if Muhammad Ali said he's never going to fight another American fighter because he doesn't want to fight his countrymen? We never would have got the Joe Frazier fight, the George Foreman fight, the Sonny Liston fight. Could you imagine if Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales said, we're not going to fight each other because we fly the same flag?
If Nigel Benn and Chris Eubanks Sr. said that.
And it's a postmodern invention because in no era of boxing besides this one did I ever hear a guy say, well, I don't want to fight that guy because he comes from the same place as me.
Enough of that crap.
It's getting ridiculous is what it is. You fight Jaime Munguia, you take care of that guy in a fan-friendly fight, then you see about fighting Benavidez in September. If not that, retire, because no one wants to see you fight Charlo.
Why the fuck would anybody want to see that?
All of this is on the premise that the story is true. If the story is true, and Canelo Alvarez is the one pushing to fight Jermall,
Drop the belts and retire.
just drop the fucking belts and retire. For wasting our time with fights like that, call it a career, buddy.
Enough already.